Higher education and workplace training are changing rapidly and dramatically. We will preview the upcoming Distance Teaching and Learning Conference this morning on For the Record. Good morning, I'm Neil Heinen. While much of the recent focus on education in this country has been unfortunately political, actual teaching, training, and learning are changing in significant ways. Technology and innovation are driving new approaches to education, and as usual, the University of Wisconsin is out front. The annual Distance Teaching and Learning Conference is coming up in a few weeks, so we thought we'd give you a glimpse at what will be talked about and what the future of education looks like. I welcome to For the Record Conference Director Les Howles, Director of UW-Madison's Distance Education Professional Development, and Jeffrey Russell, Dean of the Division of Continuing Studies and UW-Madison Vice Provost for Lifelong Learning. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
You know, this is one of those shows was brought to my attention by Dean Robbins, an old colleague who sent me this information that again reminds me how little I know, to say nothing of how people watching this show might know about what really is going on in education today. You know, I think of the old cliche, this is not your father's education world anymore, Jeffrey. How do you describe to people who think of schools of education at colleges in rather old-fashioned ways what's really happening there?
Well, I think that one of the exciting things at UW-Madison is that a lot of people in the audience today associate the university. Either they follow maybe the athletics, maybe they're a graduate, maybe they know someone that's actually enrolled here. But the realities are we do a lot of other things to make the kind of programs that we have more accessible to the adult learner. So one of the things that's important for us as a university is to share our learning with a broader audience. And a big part of that is the kind of things that Les and his team work on to think about new tools, new technologies that can increase access. Because after all, we're all lifelong learners and we all want to be engaged and we're all at different stations in that learning process. So what the conference that Les will overview provides for us is a way to really look at these innovations and the things that we're excited about in terms of sharing and that we're also implementing on campus.
Yeah. Well, before we get to the conference, Les, talk about how your day job influences the kind of stuff Jeff's talking about here.
Well, basically what we do in our unit, Distance Education Professional Development, is we help teachers teach more effectively online using new technology tools. And this would include the K-12 community, higher education, corporate, military, a wide spectrum of groups that we deal with. So we develop courses and certificate programs that train them and give them exposure to new technologies. And there is just so much happening right now in the way of educational innovations that teachers, trainers need to keep abreast of some of these new tools, methods of teaching.
Yeah. Are we still dealing with resistance to some of this innovation, Jeff? And in terms of its contrast to the teacher in front of the classroom of however many students and that in-person learning, or is the research pretty well out on that?
Yeah, I think like in all cases, you know, there are pockets where some people don't have the same level of understanding. But I think the one thing about instructors and teachers are they want to enable their students to learn, and they're realizing that new technologies and new approaches are developing. So I think that what we're trying to do with Les and his team and others is to try to make that training and that education more available so that it's easier to implement, because I think our experience in terms of managing those kind of changes, the challenge is to say you ought to do it versus here's how we can help you do it, are two different approaches. And I think the conference really is to set up to try to help provide more learning community, more information on tools and processes. And as Les was saying, I think one of the key things are we're really trying to help people practice, because education at the core is a practice. In our ability to help develop these skills and these understand the tools and the approach and be able to have a broader community are really important in terms of taking the journey in a collective way, not, you know, kind of like I've got to do all this on my own and here I am, I'm overwhelmed with the technology and I can lose focus and relevance and importance, because the question is, how do we help the student? How do we help the learner? That's really the key element here.
How do you define the learner? I mean, just philosophically, how much of it is the traditional college student and how much is the returning student, the lifelong learning student?
Well, that's an excellent question. I mean, we would say, you know, from cradle to grave, we're all learners, and we're all in different structures and systems. As Les pointed out, some might be in a corporate or working in a public service role, and they're continuing their education, but it could be in a different format. They might be taking, for example, a massively open online course. As an example, they might have individual corporate training, for example. So
better define a MOOC, just for those people who don't know what a massively open online course is.
So a massively open online course is, this is learning that is open access and that is available. So if you look at if you go online and you type those words in MOOC, you'll see various folks like Coursera pop up, and you'll see a number of courses. And we've offered up to this point a total of 8 courses, and we've got another 2 yet. But I think that the notion here is that we make high-quality learning experiences available to a broader audience. And so, for example, a recent one we did on Aldo Leopold had a lot of Wisconsin interest, because talking about the conservation, talking about ecology, talking about the role of the hunter, all of these kind of things played really, really key roles. So I think that, to answer again, to think of your question, we're all learners. And, you know, we might not necessarily see ourselves in a formal assessed like a K through 12 or in higher education, but we're trying to address that broad spectrum, and we see a lot of changes happening in the higher ed space, because we're flipping classrooms, we're using technology better, because the students are, and I'm sure Les will talk about this, digital natives and all of this kind of terminology that's being used now that is not, I'm sure that's maybe not where you came from, that's not where I think it Les came from, in terms of that, you know, we had somebody standing in front, I was told, sit down, be quiet, don't ask any questions. I thought, whoa, wow, it's a different world now.
Les, I can't pass up that opportunity. What's a digital native?
Well, back in about 1999, a thought leader by the name of Mark Prensky, who, by the way, is coming to our conference this year, he coined the term digital native to describe primarily the child, the young adult growing up, as being surrounded with electronic technologies, games, and cell phones, or whatever. And these youngsters are growing up in a new environment, an environment that has this surround of electronic technologies, instant information, global reach. And this is the generation of digital natives. They grew up with computers, whereas we grew up with books, of course. They grew up with this television and electronic technology surrounding them. So they have a different set of needs, and they learn differently. They have different learning preferences. And those are digital natives, as compared to digital immigrants, which would probably be us, who grew up primarily in the traditional, more mechanical age.
Well, when we come back, I'm going to talk about how one teaches differently, perhaps, in some of these different environments. And we're going to talk about the conference right after this. My guests this morning are Jeffrey Russell, who is the Dean of the Division of Continuing Studies and UW-Madison Vice Provost for Lifelong Learning, and Les Howles, who is the Director of the UW-Madison's Distance Education and Professional Development, and the Director of the upcoming conference on distance teaching and learning and continuing innovation in education. We're talking about innovation in education this morning, and we were talking about massive open online courses, just for one example lesson. I was thinking, in terms of your work, how teachers teach differently in that kind of an environment, and how you're now needing to think how to help train these teachers.
And just to go back a second here on what you were talking about earlier, 7, 8 years ago, you found a lot of teachers and faculty sitting on the fence about new technologies and new innovations in teaching. And I've seen that just dissolve over the last few years. I think most educators now in higher ed, in corporate, are really on board with using more innovative teaching methods and tools nowadays. So this is probably the most exciting period to be in right now as a teacher, as a trainer, because the tools and methods have just exploded. You know, you have so many choices now. The big challenge is you know, figuring out how to use these most effectively to teach in new ways, teach more effectively, more efficiently.
Yeah, and what you said about young people and how, you know, kids are growing up in a whole different learning environment, I think is forcing us, just if for no other reason, just in terms of the words that we use, but gaming, for example. I mean, games is now an important part of education innovation, right?
Sure. And I think one of the things, you know, to follow on what Les was saying, the important element here is how do we make the learning more active? So when you think about the design of a high quality learning experience, I think what instructors have now, in terms of what Les is saying, where they have tools, they have processes, they have different ways to think about, so that they might have a wide spectrum in their class that then allows them to meet the needs of those various students, but in a very designed way that we can get them involved. So like with games, as you know, we have very active work in video games and learning with Constance Steinkuhler and Kurt Squire. And this whole notion that why games are so captivating is it engages the learner. And it creates really unique opportunities to reinforce material, create, to enable them to learn different problem-solving skills. Some things are not always going to be optimum. They're going to have to make choices, managing risks. So I think the active engagement part is really a key element, and then the ability to then unlearn some things from some of those games to supplement what things that have, you know, we've used historically.
Right. Before we get to the conference, I just this feels like an invitation to investigate opportunities for anybody, you know, who's watching this show, who's seeing this online, and yet that too seems like perhaps a barrier, because the typical application process and getting into the university, I don't know how many people now are thinking of, this is something that I can do, that I can get access to. Is it that easily available and accessible?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about that, Les.
I'll just mention one thing in passing, is that right now the amount of open educational resources out there for anyone who wants to learn anything is available. Just look at YouTube, for instance. You know, if you want to learn how to be a mechanic on your car, I mean, you can go to YouTube and type in, you know, how to change a spark plug. And the same thing goes with teaching math and science. You know, students are struggling, and they can go to their iPads, their mobile devices, and very quickly get access to information and learn things at the time of need. Yep. I think the acceleration, people wanting to learn things at the time of need, a more personalized approach to learning, and it's forcing educators to also tap into these open educational resources that are out there. You don't need 10 different or 100 different lessons on chemiosmosis. One good tutorial out there on certain topics can meet the need of a million students, actually.
So if learning the guitar is any example, some of these are better than others.
Absolutely.
I have experienced. And so that's where I think this idea of what, more formal, more professional teaching and training gets to be pretty important.
Yeah, I think that's a key part, is that there can be the notion of what constitutes quality and how does it fit in the designed quality experience. And I think that's really why you need high quality instructors and teachers, is they've really got to be in the librarian language, the curator of those, and have to really think through, because they have to know their students and what's going to work and what isn't going to work. But I think, you know, to your point earlier, I think that we're trying to create access here. Someone might be thinking about considering a job change, and they might want to be in the space where they better understand teaching and learning. The conference is very accessible. The beauty of the kind of things our division does is that they're in what's called not for credit. In other words, we're not awarding degrees. So we're being an open access in terms of opportunity for people to come in, very well designed, high quality learning experiences with the adult in mind. Because we know that the adult has a lot of experience. I mean, that's what a lot of these sessions will take advantage of, is the experience of the adult in their own life experience, but also in their teaching and learning space. Because we've all been learners, and we all have experience to draw on this, whether it was positive or it was negative in terms of things that worked for us and that didn't work for others. And I think we can we can use that experience to help us be more effective, you know, as instructors and teachers.
All right, one last contextual question. This sounds so entrepreneurial. I mean, it sounds, you know, so innovative compared to sort of traditional education. How is it integrated into the whole sort of UW philosophy and vision and mission?
Yeah. Welcome to the new UW system and university.
Right? Yeah.
and I think that it's, in that context, it's a huge opportunity, because I think if we think about this in terms of helping our students learn better and how to really create these transformative, unique learning experiences, which it is the experience too that's a key element, is really a great opportunity. So I think with all of these things, we're finding when we serve our audience, discussions that we have. So we have, for example, a grief certificate as well as the work in the distance education. Well, it's amazing how the kind of teaching and stuff that's going on in that space is actually being leveraged by some other things that is happening on campus. Yeah. So the audiences can vary, but I think everybody understands that if the content is more available, then you have to really think about who the audience is, what you're designing it for, what are your objectives, what do they want to know when they're done, these important things at the end.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, Les, I'll ask you to walk us through the conference and talk about some of the sessions and speakers right after this. I am back with Les Howles and Jeffrey Russell from the University of Wisconsin, and this conference is 30 years now, Les. I mean, people watching this might think it's the first one. It's going on for a long time. But talk about the schedule and
the program.
Yeah, the program.
Yeah, the program is very diverse. We have keynoters who are at the international level, as I mentioned, Mark Prensky earlier. We have concurrent information sessions where practitioners from different colleges and organizations across the country share some of the work that they've done. We have discussion groups where small groups of people can sit around like us and discuss a topic or issue or problem that they're confronting. A lot of networking opportunities at the conference. We have an emerging topics cafe where at any time during the conference a topic emerges that more people want to talk about, they can gather there to form small groups to talk about it. We have rapid speed sessions where people present the work they've done in 10 minutes or less. So the attendee at the conference can move from venue to venue, and I like to think we offer a variety of different the venue offers a variety of different elements for people with different learning preferences and needs.
That's interesting. I mean, it's an innovative way of talking about innovation. I mean, and you've got to do it that way.
Right. We also have an exhibition hall where vendors come and show some of the new technologies, a learning lab where people can go and get some hands-on experience with some new tools. For instance, what Google has a variety of new tools out for teaching that we can get some hands-on experience, and workshops. Half-day workshops that people can attend.
You know, it feels kind of prestigious that this is happening here and that people from around the country, if not beyond, right, every year come to this as sort of the premier conference of its kind?
It has been, yeah. Actually, internationally, too. We have, last year we had 20 countries represented at the conference, and we expect at least that many this year, too.
Are we, I mean, is this furthering this direction towards what, individual learning or personalized learning, or where the individual is what dictates how we teach and train? Is that, is that accurate?
Yeah, I think, and you know, again, to my take on the conference is it's a place to express thought leadership around these kind of topics, because in many cases it's in flux that there is no one answer on all these things. A lot of this is dialogue and discussion around these things. And I think from the personalized learning space, or from that perspective, I mean, we have personalized banking, you have personalized medicine. And when you think about from the learning, the idea of the individual in their own unique way and their own style can really understand that. And then the designer of the instructor can be sensitive to that. Then the question is, how do we put all of these things together so that you can help the student on their own, because they can be independent learners, and that's really, but if we're going to design specific opportunities for them, how do we do that in a way that's really going to help them remain active and really develop the knowledge and the skills that they need. And so I think this whole notion of personalized learning also takes out a lot of the things that Les and his team in the conference will talk about. Well, time and space. I mean, there are certain things that create structure that are there for a reason, but when you get to the personalized piece, I think that's where a lot of those things start to flex a little bit. Don't you think, Les?
Yeah, you know, there's many different ways to learn, and I think we're recognizing that now. Some of the newer innovations that actually adapt and shift the instructional material and program based on the needs of the learner is really amazing. And the field of big data and learning analytics, you know, we know a lot about learners right now. We can track what they're doing online, and then we can steer them down a path that will help them learn better for their particular orientation to learning and for their needs. It's just amazing what some of the new technologies enable us to do now.
It's terribly unfair to ask you this question with a minute and a half to go, but just, you know, how much of this is about a richer life, pursuing knowledge for just the inherent satisfaction of gaining knowledge, and how much is preparing a workforce that in this 21st century economy is totally different than it was 20 years ago, like education?
Well, let me take the first crack at it, and then I'll let Les finish with the conference.
You each have 30 seconds in that case.
I think the important part is to really focus on making, if you want wellness, it's about staying actively involved. And whether it's the arts and the humanities or it's a specific job skill, our division is trying to help meet both of those needs. And specifically in this case, on the distance ed, if you want to just summarize in terms of the key parts on that.
On the conference itself.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to think our conference is personalized and adapted to the needs of a wide spectrum of professionals and practitioners.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you both very much for spending some time and sharing it with us. And we're going to come back and wrap up For the Record right after this. My thanks to Jeffrey Russell and Les Howles. Next week on For the Record, we will take a look at the upcoming Madison Gas and Electric Community Energy Conversations with Don Edwards, a consultant they've brought in. Join us then and enjoy the rest of your weekend.